As I sat down in this chair in my villa in Bali, it suddenly occurred to me that we're doing this recording about 2 weeks beyond the 20-year anniversary of the first time that Jeshua appeared to me, July 20, 1987. It sent some chills up my spine as I suddenly realized how much has transpired in these past 20 years. And yet those 20 years seem to have gone by in the twinkling of an eye. And it made me realize that something Jeshua said about the spiritual journey is quite true. That as we awaken, time itself seems to disappear. And why is that? Because as we awaken, we rest in the now. We're no longer struggling to survive. We're no longer fearful of an anticipated future, nor are we caught up with the anxieties of an unhealed past. Rather, we become infinite conduit, present in this eternal infinite now moment, and that infinite one we refer to as God, that he often refers to in this material as the Father or the Mother God or Allah. That one is living us. One comes to see that they don't have a life, life is living them. There's a deep quality of peace that comes to pervade us as finally the spiritual journey brings the ship of the soul into the harbor of God's love. And so as I sit here and realize that 20 years have passed, I can observe my mind to go back to that day, July 20th, 1987, when a pinprick of light appeared in my living room. The light grew, inundating me in waves of bliss and of love and of power beyond anything I could have ever imagined. That day abruptly stopped my life, the direction of my own compulsions, my own interpretations, my persona, the masks I wore in society, the inner hidden turmoils that so many of us still carry in our being. Abruptly, it put me on a pathway that would lead me home. I was put on that pathway by the Master of Masters. Jeshua, or Jesus, has come to mean to me what he has come to mean to so many others. He is indeed the Master of Masters. And when you open to him, whether in some form of mystical experience such as I had, or simply by opening the pages of the Jeshua letters, the Way of the Servant, or any of the PathWay texts, especially the Way of Mastery, you are making contact with the highest and deepest and widest source of wisdom and truth and power. And that power is indeed the power that will magnetize your soul into awakening from all dreams of separation, from guilt, and from fear. Once he said to me many years ago, as this experience was first beginning, "My beloved brother, the day will arise when you will look back upon all of your doubt and all of your anxiety and wonder that it ever arose at all. For well do I know what shall transpire, for the end of this journey is perfectly certain." Your journey, too, is perfectly certain.
My background's in A Course in Miracles. I've been a student for over 20 years. And I've been working with the Jesuit teachings as well for about 10. What I found is that the Jesuit teachings for me were really the next step of A Course in Miracles, the sequel to it, if you want to put it that way. Whereas A Course in Miracles is really focused primarily on intellectual concepts with a goal of bringing peace of mind. I find that the Way of teachings through Jayem, Jeshua through Jayem, really are about integrating into the entire experience. And there's actually a different goal. The goal is the ability to incarnate, to bring up all of the issues that need to be addressed in one's own spiritual path, not just simply intellectual concepts and the resolution of one's mind intellectual relationship to that. So it's about really going into the heart and into the whole body.
So there came a point, and those of you that have read the Jeshua letters are aware of it, that he asked me to let this become a book called the Jeshua letters in a rather extraordinary way. And after my panic stopped and I simply put my hands on my hips and said, fine, if you want it published, you'll have to do it. And miracles did in fact unfold the publishing of that book. I thought the journey was done. That would be it. I could go back to doing whatever I might do in life and la-di-da, life would go on. Little did I know that that was merely preparation, a beginning. As this process with him continued, I took a little vacation and went to Hawaii. And while I was there, he came to me while I was shopping and said, buy that empty notebook. And that night, I was at a little campsite on the big island of Hawaii, and again felt this movement in my heart, and I felt him, and by then I could hear his voice very clearly speaking to me. And he would ask me to open up the little notebook and that he would begin, and ask me again to take notes. And that began to be the beginning of the second work that he brought through me called The Way of the Servant. During that process of The Way of the Servant, I carried this little red notebook with me every day for months. Once I was at my friend Tom Carpenter's house on Kauai, and I conveniently left it behind me when I went back to Washington, because it challenged me once again. It kept revealing to me where I was still living egoically, where I would talk about my love of God, but what I lived was a love of myself. So what did Tom do? He sent the dang thing back to me. God, here I thought I'd lost it, and the guy sends it back to me. I have no choice. Finally, I just submitted to the fact this was the way it's going to be, and I carried the thing around with me. And then one day, as I penned the final words without knowing they were final, he said, Amen, which always signals from him that something is now at the end. And it just hit me like a bolt of lightning. That, my God, it's done. It had been months and months and months carrying this little red notebook around. It's now a simple little book, a simple, beautiful book of not many pages, and yet it, oh God, what it contains will transform your life. Some are now calling one of the greatest mystical treatises ever produced in the world, because it so profoundly talks to the last levels of consciousness. He describes in simple poetic verse the nature of the life that unfolds when one's journey into Christ's mind is culminated, the way of the servant. If you think about it, well, of course, if I'm no longer striving to get or to gain, if I no longer sense a place of lack and emptiness in my being, what's there left to do except serve? And one becomes a conduit for service that alleviates the suffering of others and helps their own hearts and souls awaken. The Way of the Servant is a book I now read probably once a year, and still, 20 years later, every time I read it, there is a new depth revealed in it that I didn't even know existed the year before. So the process of ongoing growth continues, and yet the Way of the Servant seems to be larger than it. It keeps revealing more and more of what Christ's mind is really all about. What began then would come to be what is called now the Way of Mastery, a book and also a set of CDs that are the compilation of 3 years of once-a-month recordings that he asked us to do. Again, I had no idea what he was going to be doing, but he commenced with what we now call the Way of Mastery with Book 1 or Year 1, which was called the Way of the Heart. The Way of the Heart sets forth the essential foundation from which a genuine spiritual journey unfolds. Without this foundation, you're doing nothing but window shopping. The intricacy with which this essential teaching of Christ's mind is laid out looks succinct and simple when you read it, but it carries a template of such intricacy that very clearly he knew exactly where it was going, how it needed to be given to get the listener of the tapes or the reader of the book there over this 3-year period. As someone who has a degree in philosophy and psychology and has done some writing, I remain absolutely astounded at the level of teaching mastery that is within the Way of Mastery itself. It is a masterful creation.
There is something magical about the Way of Mastery. When I start studying the course, very early on, I start noticing that certain events of my life that were unfolding were actually very similar with the theory that I was studying. And one lesson after the other, I saw it wasn't a coincidence.
The Way of Mastery, what is that? The way of the heart, the way of transformation, the way of knowing. 3 manuals, because I truly can't think of anything else you could call them, as to how to become Christ mind, how to become that the Christ is, that state of being, how to bring that forward in your life and to live from that space rather than from the little space that we tend to normally present ourselves.
This course works in conjunction with the universe and offers you the precise exercises and events in your life that's going to help you to test and see for yourself the theory that you're studying.
The Way of Mastery humbles me. And I know that it's humbled and uplifted thousands of people that have come in contact with these teachings. Again, they were originally recorded as an audio, in an audio format, and those teachings remain available through the Shanti Cristo Foundation in America and in Australia through Elohim Way of the Heart Journal. And there's something profound about the audio version of the Way of Mastery, because they contain the living frequency or essence of Jeshua vibrationally as sound, and you hear the inflections and the pauses that often get lost in the written text. I think both serve the human modalities for learning, but there's something profound to putting on one of those CDs with a pair of headphones, closing your eyes and abiding in breath, what we came to call love's breath. They're profound. They truly are profound. And to give you a taste of where the spiritual journey begins, I'd like to read to you something from the Way of the Heart, taken from the Way of Mastery. The Way of the Heart is that pathway that cultivates within you the decision to turn your attention upon your own mind, upon your own behavior, upon what is true and real for you, moment to moment, to study it, to consider it, to feel it, to breathe the light of Spirit through it. And right there, he lays out the cornerstone of true spiritual transformation, something that he would then come to teach me and to help me master in what I call radical inquiry. And to constantly retrain the mind so that it assumes complete responsibility in each moment. Why is this necessary? Because without it, there can be no peace. In the lessons that follow, we will be communicating with you more and more deeply the finer points of the way of the heart. It is that way that was taught to me, to Jeshua. It is that way that brings about the reversal of every thought you have ever had about anyone or anything. It is that way alone which allows you to pass back through the eye of the needle and to come to rest in the perfect peace from which you have sprung forth. The way of the heart is not the way of the intellect, for indeed that aspect of the mind was never designed to be your master. The heart is that which feels all things, embraces all things, trusts all things, and allows all things. The heart is that in which the soul rests eternally. The heart is that which is beyond space and time, and is that spark of light in the mind of God, which is called Christ. Only in that will you ever find the peace that you seek. So he lays out for us there what is so essential. The heart is not our personal little vibrating thing in the body in which we have our own proclivities, loves, and desires. The true heart is beyond that personal self. It transcends space and time. And he also lays out for us what is absolutely necessary to master to bring about a transformation that allows us to rest in identity as the heart, which is Christ. And Christ is held as a spark of light in the eternal mind of God. There is then a very real journey that takes us from who we think we are to that which we are eternally. And that gives you a little taste of the wisdom and the succinctness that you can find in the way of mastery. It also lays out the pathway of transformation that he then more deeply refined as he took me into the processes of radical inquiry, love's breath, and the things we now use, such as the Beatitudes and the Lord's Prayer, as the living yoga, the living transformational tools that take the words of the way of mastery and transform them into the living breath and the cells of the body-mind itself, so that you become the living word, not just believing in concepts and ideas, but you become the living incarnation of the truth.
The pathway. So what is a mystic lover other than one who lives for the love of God? I guess that's what we've come to, all of those that are involved in this. And there's quite a lot now around the world in different places, little pockets. It's a particularly large group in Australia who've really embraced this whole concept that there are a series of stepping stones that Jeshua has brought through and given to us, both in Jayem's personal life and through the pathway material of the Way of Mastery, the series of books and audio tapes that are available, and the many other books and the more recently Aramaic material that we've been given, which are all demonstrating the stepping stones and providing the stepping stones for us to move forward on.
There's a huge difference between how I understand the traditional Western Beatitudes to have been taught and the way the Aramaic Beatitudes are taught, which is that the Aramaic Beatitudes actually involves creating a resonance in the body now so that we align with the state of what we could call heaven. And that's done through a variety of means, through self-inquiry, but primarily through a deepening intimate relationship with breath. The crucial element of breath, the yoga of the Christ, one could say, is something that just is nothing I'd heard of before, and it makes all the difference in the world for me. The Beatitudes didn't mean much to me before, but now I see them as an essential spiritual path.
So there was a journey of self-discovery, which in turn unfolded many different aspects of my life. My relationship with my children changed. My relationship with my present partner flourished and changed. I began to grow in strength and understand power. power from myself, power for myself. And when I say power, I mean freedom.
That's what this pathway is really all about, and it moves itself through certain stages as those stages unfolded. It begins here with this precious book, The Way of Mastery, but it lives us into something called the Way of the Servant. There was a point at which Jeshua said that I was ready and that he asked for my permission in allowing him to communicate with what he called his friends. I had no idea what that was going to mean, but by now my heart had really opened in a profound love for him. And of course I said yes, whatever that is. I had moved to Hawaii one way, moved to go be in paradise. And when this experience happened, and I gave him my permission, he said, very well, I want you to return to Tacoma, Washington. It's December. Nobody goes to Tacoma, Washington in December. It's dark, it's dreary, it's wet and cold. He said, I want you to return there, for I have some friends I wish to speak with. First test. Am I actually going to follow through on my word? So I packed my things and went back to Tacoma. Made arrangements, and some friends came over, and I'll never forget that first night. I was petrified. I had no idea what was going to happen. It is love that will heal this world. Love abides in its own presence and in its own certainty and in a holy and ancient knowledge. You cannot seek for love, and you cannot find it. You can desire it, and your intention can become so pure that nothing else distracts you. And in the end, love can only be allowed to be extended through you. You cannot be the one who is the creator of love. You can't puff yourself up with it so that you can give it away. There are no magical techniques that will build its power within you. It's already given to you freely. And miracles, therefore, must occur naturally to minds that teach only love, that teach only love, that teach only love, because there's no dark corners of the mind left that you have sought to save for yourself. I come in this hour to ask you to be that one who from this hour forward will indeed teach only love, will be the one who knows and lives the fact that all needs are already met, to be the one whose mind is corrected, to whom sanity is restored. For when you walk in this world for such a short time, as the presence of only peace, you will affect everyone who enters your domain. They may not understand it. They may indeed think it's because of your body that they're attracted to you. They may think it's because of the wisdom that seems to pour forth through your mouth, although you won't remember what you said when you're done, because it's not you doing the talking. But they will feel the presence of peace, and it must necessarily touch that place of peace in them. And when that window opens, light rushes in, and their process of awakening can deepen, continue, or perhaps begin. I want you to understand that there will be no one who witnesses this, what you call tape, and hear these words, who has not already been in communication with me, who I will not guide to hear these words. And yes, that means that everything the human mind has ever created is used by the love of God as the very stepping stones that must bring the whole of creation back into remembrance of perfect union.
That the essential teaching is that only love is real, that we are not separate from one another, and that means we do not have separate interests. So if we choose for our own truth, which is a heart thing, not an idea thing, and we speak our truth, choose for our happiness. As Jeshua says, if your goal is to do what is best for those you love, then always choose first for your own happiness. Now, that may sound selfish in some ways, but if we think about it, if we think that we share common interests, it can't be selfish, because to say that if we sacrifice our interests for another, we're really saying that we're separate, and we're not. So the beauty of it is by being true to ourselves, by being true to our guidance, if you want to call it that, we serve everyone. We can have faith that we serve the best interests of everyone at all times.
What began to unfold, and I remember now that very early, even back in 1988, he talked about part of what he was doing with his work through me was to establish or to reestablish a pathway whereby any soul could really truly come into the fulfillment and the maturing of an embodied Christ mind. And of course then it didn't make any sense to me, and then I forgot about it in the years and the steps of my own journey. And what began to unfold near the end of the time of the recording of the Way of Mastery texts was that one day I asked him a question about the Lord's Prayer, and the response astounded me. He didn't answer it to me in his normal way, he actually said it to me in his ancient language of Aramaic. And the sounds vibrated through me profoundly and powerfully. It somehow felt absolutely familiar to me, which confounded my mind. And then he, in his inimitable style, said, "My brother, I would suggest to you that you might find it fruitful to begin to recover your understanding of this prayer." It impacted me so profoundly that I spent close to a year every day just revisiting in my consciousness how I had heard him say these words. The sounds did something to me. And so I kept practicing, and I discovered some works of some other scholars, and I just began to rest in meditation. And it took me about a year before I could say the Lord's Prayer and intone it with the same inflections that I had heard that one day from him. It lived so deeply in my body. It was like putting a record on every day and going back into that vibration. Avum, Avum, Avum. The Boshmaya, the Boshmaya, the Boshmaya. Nita Kadash Shema, Nita Kadash Shema, Nita Kadash Shema. Tete Malkuta, Tete Malkuta, Tete Malkuta. Nevre Sevina Kakana the Boshmaya Oparha. Nevre Sevina Kakana the Boshmaya Oparha. Nevre Sevina Kanada Washmaya Oparaha. Howlan Lachman Sun Kanan Yamana. Howlan Lachman Sun Kanan Yamana. Howlan Lachman Sun Kanan Yamana. Washwoklan Halpain. Washwoklan Halpain. Washwoklan Halpain. Ekana Daphanan Shwakin Il Hayavain. Ekana Daphanan Shwakin Il Hayavain. Ekana Daphanan Shwakin Il Hayavain. Ula Talan Omnisciana. Ula Talan Omnisciana. Ula Talan Omnisciana. Ela passam en lisha. Ela passam en lisha. Ela passam en lisha. Het hadelachi malkuda. Het hadelachi malkuda. Het hadelachi malkuda. Uhaila utishbata. Uhaila utishbata. Uhaila utishbata. La alam. Amin. Amen. La alam. Amin. Amen. La alam. Amin. Amen. To make a long story short, a rather interesting story, I've come now to understand that in Aramaic, and in the original Aramaic form of key teachings that are to this day still found in the Bible, we actually are uncovering the heart and soul of what I call his living yoga. It goes beyond the way of mastery in that I think that those texts are like preparation, a very important preparation that reduces fear sufficiently so that one truly is ready for the profound and final stages of alchemy of enlightenment, of coming into Christ's mind. And what we find in the Lord's Prayer and the Beatitudes specifically are what I refer to as the yoga of the living Christ. The Lord's Prayer and the Beatitudes cannot be taken as just platitudes or statements. Each line is actually a call to a living practice of breath, of feeling, of sound, and of inquiry into the deepest roots and layers of the egoic system itself, and a transformation that impacts heart, soul, mind, and body, as the deepest patterns of separation are finally dislodged from the soil of the soul itself and replaced with an attunement. The ancient Aramaic word is shalu, translated as to pray, but to pray isn't to utter a bunch of words, it's to create a living attunement at every level of our being, from pure spirit, through soul, through mind and emotion, all the way down into the living flesh of the body, to unknot the knots of separation, of any wounds that have been pushed and repressed down into the subconscious. This is a very real living alchemy. Yet I've come to see that every soul must come to the stage where we are ready to go even beyond the way of mastery, as profound as it is, and to see that it is still only preparation for the yet deeper living work that he himself underwent. For instance, in the Bible we know that he was called to go fast in the desert for 40 days and 40 nights. Well, what did he do there? He didn't read a book. He breathed, he inquired, he felt, he dropped into the depth of the soul and its fears and its patterns of unworthiness. This is depicted as him confronting the devil. The devil is nothing but the shadow of our own self, the deepest cellar roots of our fears and inadequacies. And as he was taught, he teaches in the Lord's Prayer and the Beatitudes a very specific yoga. And in this pathway, I believe he's restored those fundamental teachings and now made them available for us yet again. Again, it's a living yoga. Beatitude 1. Tu vayon lamaskenehi beruch dilhone malkuta dashmaya. Here in this beautiful place of softness, in the hills above the Sea of Galilee, Jeshua began to teach us something of such great importance. Now is the ripe time to be restored, to be renewed. And to those who are willing to long for and cherish and discover how to increasingly make their home in the breathing, to them will come a sense of becoming malkuta, like a fertile field, like the soil from which these roots grow a mighty tree. To them shall come forth the wisdom, the guidance, and the clarity to move forward, called not by the ego, but by the depth of the soul that rests in the palms of God. And to those, they will know that they are part of all of creation, being breathed by one holy breath. They will step fully into the completion of the purpose for which the divine has birthed them. The first beatitude. So important, so critical to comprehend, but even more important, to deepen the art of the practice of making your home in the breathing, until all things in all moments are enfolded and suffused by your maskenehi, your luminous sphere, so that in all moments your first movement is to the breath, to the remembrance of the sweetness of the breath and the light within the breath, so that the Shem is what unfolds through you and carries you in that stream of grace into the fulfillments of your moments. It's been very, very beautiful. Something rare and unique happens when friends of the heart can come together in such a beautiful place as Bali. The Balinese are probably one of the most spiritually centered people on the planet. Nothing is done without prayer and offering. And in the sublime, beautiful tropical environment, there's something about the place itself that opens your heart and relaxes you out of your normal stresses. And then coupled with our insight groups, our studies of the way of material, love's breath, and all of the rest, true miracles happen. And I know that the vast majority of people that have come here have said that it's been priceless in their journey. I invite anybody and everybody to come. You know, it's interesting that how did that happen? I get brought to a place like Bali that I wasn't intending on going to be with my friends Raj and Suzanne, and now we have an ashram that just happens to be situated across the street from Ananda Cottages, which is a beautiful resort area with a huge yoga temple set up to be a perfect place for workshops and gatherings, all provided for us effortlessly. It is absolutely the perfect place for this kind of work. One walks down off the main street and descends down a hillside, terraced hillside of Shangri-La, Garden of Eden. It's so beautiful, almost as if you're stepping into a womb that holds you in beauty and safety, yet provides the support necessary to truly dig into the essence of your own soul. Alam Chinta, the nature of love. That's why we chose the name, since this is a pathway of love. I'd really love to take a moment and share something so precious to my heart. As part of what's unfolded here in Bali, quite beautifully, there's been a birthing of something we now call Karuna Bali, or Bali Outreach, and Champawan College. Champawan is the river that flows just below us here. And you can go to the website and check that out at Bali Outreach, the miraculous story of how it was birthed. It actually came about in one of our palpable forgiveness workshops. Raj and Suzanne and I had for some time been wondering about how we could truly be helpful to these beautiful, precious people, the Balinese, who have all the heart and soul, just not the support and opportunities that many of us in the West have had and grown used to. So during this workshop, as we're focusing on opening the heart to infinity and expanding in the realm of possibilities of all that can occur, into Raj's mind got dropped the seed, and through certain connections with a man named Toko, a friend of ours, and Wayan, who ran an internet cafe, was birthed the idea, the vision of a college to teach computer skills and English to students. Well, little did we know that Spirit had a much bigger plan. And one can always tell when you're in alignment with what Spirit wants to unfold, because it's not so much that you're making it happen as it is you're running to catch up with all that's unfolding miraculously. And it has been a miraculous journey. There are now already, in the last 6 months, over 70 students studying. The college is getting recognition from teachers in the Regency here. The government is becoming aware of the excellent work we're doing there. And we're now developing full leadership programs based on the Jeshua pathway. Our goal is to help empower the Balinese to birth true leaders, true visionary leaders, based on the spiritual principle of attunement to, alignment with, and union with the divine. And one precious part of it is that when people come here to the ashram, they have an opportunity to go volunteer their services to teach computer or art or English classes, and you should just see them light up with this opportunity to be of true service. For you see, a cornerstone of Jeshua's teachings is this: to have all, give all, and until you give what you've received, you have not completed your true receiving of it. When you see the fruit of your giving and service in the transformation of others' lives, then you know you have received that fruit. So Karuna Bali, Bali Outreach, Champawan College, I invite you to go take a look at the website and get involved. Find out what it's like to grow yourself by impacting the lives of others in such a beautiful way. One vision that is part of Jeshua's plan, as it's come to be revealed to me at any rate, and understood by me, is that as this Aramaic pathway has been restored and is beginning to bear great fruit, we're actually producing trainings for teachers who know how to use breath and inquiry and the Beatitudes and Lord's Prayer, their own counseling work, their own workshops and trainings. So it's Jeshua's methodology for transforming the soul is seeing a major rebirth happening now, and it's really getting out through grassroots effort out into the world. But part of that has been a birthing of a vision to create a documentary and then a future feature film which will help restore the original teachings of Jeshua as found in his Aramaic teachings that are there in the Bible but have been lost through mistranslation. He has been loved or loathed for over 2,000 years. A powerful world religion lays claim to his name. And yet, do we truly know what he actually taught? Is our increasing chaos and conflict due to the loss of what he actually taught? Has it been replaced by a mere cult of beliefs about him?
Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name.
Have we been misled or even deceived? Take an incredible journey that is sure to surprise you, shock you, and finally inspire you with a new hope for humanity. Speaking for where I am today and where I live in my consciousness, I wish I could convey to you that you are carried in the stream of grace, that the benevolence of the universe is fully devoted to your awakening, your healing, and the true fulfillment of the soul. This pathway, then, under Jeshua's guidance, offers to you that which alone fulfills the soul. Yes, there are many pathways to it, but they become one at the highest reaches of consciousness. And at that level of consciousness, even you will awaken and proclaim from the depth of your being, I and my Father